All right, good evening. Thank you for tuning into this first masterclass of the year, a little different from what we're usually doing, which is maybe a virtual retirement workshop or an in-person retirement workshop. With these masterclasses, we're going to be taking a deep dive into a specific nuance or specific benefit that you have access to as an employee of Verizon. And so tonight we're going to be talking about everything relating to early retirement offers from Verizon. You know, the decision of whether or not to retire, that's one of the biggest decisions that we could make, right? Mm-hmm. And, you know, from a financial perspective, from an emotional perspective, you know, and other aspects as well. And then when you receive an early retirement offer from Verizon, that decision is accelerated to a certain extent within that offer period. So we're going to be talking about everything related to Verizon retirement offers tonight. Hapanowitz and Associates, for those of you who aren't very familiar with us, we are an independent wealth management firm. We're based in downtown Pittsburgh, but we work with Verizon employees all over the country. We've been doing this for over 20 years, working with Verizon employees and helping them not only understand their Verizon benefits, but maximize their Verizon retirement benefits, specifically within their retirement income and cash flow planning. Now, we're not affiliated with Verizon, nor are we endorsed by Verizon. We are completely independent. And before we dive into this topic, make sure to check out the Retirement Red Zone. So retiringfromverizon.com. It's a page that we created on our website, hapanowitz-associates.com. And it's an online resource dedicated to all things relating to your retirement benefits. Now, this is if you've got 10 years until retirement, and maybe you're thinking about retiring in the next year or two, or maybe you're already retired, this website is for you. This is from, again, our 20 plus years of experience put together. Make sure to check it out. And you can also sign up to receive emails and notifications with future master classes, future in-person workshops, and any other correspondence that we might put out relating to your benefits. So now I'm going to turn it over to Bobby, and you're going to be telling everybody what we're talking about tonight.
Absolutely. So we'll be discussing everything related to early retirement offers for Verizon today. So we'll start with what is an early retirement offer. We'll break down the different types of early retirement offers and each component of an offer and how they could differentiate between the different types. We'll discuss how to fill out that early retirement form, the timeline of all the factors that you should be considering when you are filling out that form and thus retiring. And then some of the factors to consider when deciding whether or not you want to take that offer. And that doesn't just include your 401k or pension benefit, that includes your other benefits, including medical and other benefits that you really should be considering. And a lot to consider. So we do have a couple of case studies to help guide how all of those components can help you make that decision. And lastly, we'll be answering what might be the most important question, what I can do to prepare for the possibility of an early retirement offer now. And, you know, we attempt to answer that by discussing the importance of a retirement plan, starting the plan soon. So with that in mind, we expect the presentation to last about 40 to 45 minutes. We appreciate that everybody who submitted questions ahead of time will be answering those at the end. If you have any questions, feel free to submit those as we go. Okay, so let's get started. What is an early retirement offer? And an early retirement offer is a financial incentive to retire earlier than you may have previously planned. And these are offered by management when Verizon determines that there is a surplus of workers in a specific work group or job title, and they feel the need to downsize those certain portions of the workforce. And the idea of a retirement offer is it provides a monetary benefit to eligible employees who volunteer to separate from service, and it gives Verizon Associates some financial protection, and it gives that bridge to help ease the transition to another job or into full retirement. And so for those of us in the Mid-Atlantic region, we expect to see, we've seen in the past several years, one to two retirement offers in any given year. Those range in terms of the incentives offered. The first is an income security plan. The second is the enhanced income security plan. And then the third is the special enhanced income security plan. And so we'll be discussing the differences between those in the coming slides here. But let's get right into the components. And there's a few main components, financial components to a retirement offer. And the first is that voluntary termination bonus. And this is typically paid as a lump sum within 30 days of retiring from Verizon. And that's a direct deposit typically to your bank account. All taxes are automatically withheld from the benefit. It's treated as ordinary income for tax purposes, very similar to how you would receive your paycheck in that manner. And that benefit amount will vary depending on the type of offer released. So with an ISP offer and an enhanced ISP offer, that termination bonus is $10,000. With a special ISP offer, there's a supplemental $40,000 bonus in addition to total to a $50,000 termination bonus.
Okay, so let's talk about the second main component of retirement offers from Verizon, which is that payment allowance. Now, this benefit is based off of a couple different components. Number one, your years of net credited service. So how long have you been working for Verizon? And then number two is that benefit amount that's applied per year of service. So skipping down to the bottom of the screen, another way that these three offers are different from each other is that benefit. So for an an income security plan, that benefit is $1,100 per year of net credited service with a maximum of 30 years of service applied. For an enhanced ISP, $2,200 per year of net credited service, again, maximum of 30 years applied. And for a special ISP, what's different is that the maximum number of years is 40 years for $2,200 per year of credited service. Same thing as the termination bonus in terms of taxes. All payments are taxable, subject to withholding. So the benefit you're going to receive is going to be net of taxes. Now, there's a couple different ways that your payment allowance could be paid out to you, and it's depending on some variables, which I'm going to go through here with you. So skipping between the first bullet point and the third bullet point on this slide, if your total payment allowance is equal to less than $10,000, or if your total payment allowance is equal to or greater than $10,000, well, no matter what, you're going to be, one more thing. If it's equal to or greater than $10,000, but you're 67 or older, then no matter what, you're going to receive that benefit 100% in a lump sum at retirement. Okay, now going to that second bullet point, if you are less than 67 years old and your benefit is equal to or greater than $10,000, then you're going to have two options available to you at your separation of service. So the first option is you can take 100% of that payment allowance benefit and have it paid over monthly installments. The second option is to take 50% as a lump sum and the other 50% of that payment allowance over those monthly installments. Now, how many monthly installments? That's going to depend on your age, how far away you are from turning 67. So if you are 4 years or more away from turning 67, then the maximum amount of monthly installments will be 48 months. If you are closer to age 67 than 4 years, then the total monthly installments is going to equal how many months until you reach age 67. And we actually have a couple of case studies that we're going to go through to further exemplify how these payment options can actually play out.
Okay, the third main financial component of an ISP offer or an early retirement offer is that expense allowance. And this can be paid in addition to your termination bonus to reimburse you for any expenses you incur as a result of your effort to seek other employment. And that can include eligible relocation, tuition, or training costs. That could also include job placement expenses. Now, the one thing it's very important that you do is make sure to get that expense approved by Verizon before you actually incur that expense. Otherwise, they will not reimburse you. And another component, that expense must be incurred within 1 year of termination as well, 1 year after leaving Verizon. So that expense allowance reimbursement can total up to $750 per year of net credited service with a maximum benefit of $3,750. And that doesn't vary with different types of offers, whether it's an ISP, enhanced ISP, or special enhanced ISP, that remains the same. Okay, so here, as Christina said, we have a couple of case studies to show you how your different options could vary depending on your age, depending on your net credited service. And we're using the special ISP offer that was released last July to many of the folks with an inside job title here in the Mid-Atlantic region. So again, a special ISP offer, there was a voluntary termination bonus of $50,000. There was a payment allowance of $2,200 for each year of net credited service. up to and including 40 years. And then if you were going to seek other employment after Verizon, you had the option to apply for the expense allowance of up to $3,750. But let's jump right into this first example here. John Smith is age 62 with 24 years of service. So let's break it down by different benefits within the ISP offer. The termination bonus, regardless of John's age, John will receive the $50,000 lump sum payment as exactly that, one lump sum payment. Okay, now let's look at the payment allowance. Okay, so John is age 62, meaning that he is greater than 48 months away from age 67, which means that he'll receive 48 monthly increments. John has 24 years of service. That means that for the payment allowance, $2,200 for each year of net credited service. That's $2,200 times 24 years of service to get to $52,800 as the total payment allowance. Now, John has a couple of different options in how he can accept that payment allowance. He can take the entire amount as 48 monthly increments of $1,100, or his second option is to receive half of that in a lump sum and the remaining half as 48 monthly increments of $550.
Okay, so let's look at this second case study, again, based off of the special ISP offer that was put out last year. So John Smith, he's 65 years old, 27 years of service. So we know that he's under age 67. And because he has 27 years of service, we know that his payment allowance is going to be more than $10,000. So that means from the perspective of the payment allowance, he's going to have those two options that we're going to talk about in more detail. Same as the first example, no matter what, he's receiving that termination bonus as a single lump sum. With the payment allowance, we take 27 years of service times that $2,200 benefit per year, and we get a total of $59,400. So his two options are, he can take $59,400 and receive that over equal monthly installments, or he can choose to take 50% of that as a single lump sum, $29,700, and then receive the other 50% over those equal monthly installments. And again, he's 65 years old. He's 2 years away from 67, 24 months. And so no matter which option he goes with, whatever amount is paid out over those monthly installments will be paid out over 24 months. Okay, this final example we have, a little different. So John is 67. He's 29 years of service. So if you recall from a few slides ago, since he's 67, if you remember, if you're 67 or older, it doesn't matter what your payment allowance totals up to be, you're automatically going to receive that entire benefit as a single lump sum. So in this example, if John were to take the offer and be accepted, he'd be receiving a single lump sum of $113,800. That's comprised of the $50,000 termination bonus and then the $63,800 payment allowance as well.
Okay, so now that we've talked about the components of an offer, let's go through the timeline of events and timeline of considerations that you should be keeping in mind if you're applying for one of these offers. And the first thing you may notice in your offer packet is the due date to complete and return the employee volunteer form. And that'll be specified, of course, with each offer, but that typically is within 30 to 45 days, calendar days of the offer release date. The second date you might notice is the official last day of work if your application would be accepted by Verizon, and that will be specified too. And aside from the obvious wanting to know when your last day of work will be, it's important to have that date in mind when you are calling for a pension estimate to the benefit center and when you're actually electing that benefit as well. And so skipping ahead to that fourth bullet, you will want to complete the employee volunteer form by the due date and fax that to the Verizon Severance Administration. That fax number is listed on the bottom part of the application, and we will go through that application here actually in a couple of slides. But when you submit that to the Severance Administration, you can expect to receive an email confirmation. But even with that in mind, we still think it's best practice to keep a copy of your fax confirmation and the employee volunteer form just in case. If you were to submit, so you want to submit that employee volunteer form before the due date. If you were to change your mind after already submitting your employee volunteer form, you could always submit what's called the offer revocation form, which is within your offer packet. And you would just need to have that in by the due date, regardless of whether you decided to take the offer or decided not to apply for the offer, any decision that you make is irrevocable after the offer due date. So that's important to keep in mind. But once you do submit your application, you'll receive notification of your either acceptance or rejection of the retirement offer. That typically happens within 7 to 10 business days. But while you're submitting that application, there's a couple of other items, ancillary items, that are also important regarding your retirement benefits that you want to be thinking about. And we have a couple of those listed here. The first being your pension. And many people think that you're not supposed to order your pension forms until you receive acceptance, the word of acceptance that you've been accepted for the offer. And that's actually not the case. As a matter of fact, we recommend that you order your pension election forms as soon as you apply for the offer. The reason being is at a very high level, there are deadlines to get your pension election forms in. The sooner you order those forms and the sooner you complete them and get them back, the higher the chance you have of getting that pension benefit payment to you, be it the annuity or the lump sum, as soon as possible after you're accepted. If you were to be rejected, what happens to your pension form? Well, nothing happens to your pension form. You simply wouldn't have to submit it. Even if you did, that pension election only happens after your retirement date. And if you don't retire, it won't go through. So you wouldn't even need to void it. There's no other work you'd have to do. It can only help you to order that pension form sooner versus later. And the other component we'll address here too is the 401k rollover or distribution request. If regardless of what that may look like in your retirement plan, we recommend calling Fidelity 2 weeks after your official retirement date, separation of service date from Verizon. The reason being, Fidelity, of course, is a different entity than Verizon. It just takes that amount of time for them to receive word of your retirement. But with that in mind, if you are ordering either a pension lump sum or a 401k rollover request, it can be important to have your IRA account open ahead of time, because both Fidelity and the Benefits Center will request an IRA account number if you are going to roll those assets over. Those are just a couple of the other really important items that you have to keep in mind when you are going through that retirement process. And it's important to understand the nuances and complexities with each one of those items in order to maximize your retirement benefits. It's very important. And aside from the pension and the 401k, there's retiree healthcare benefits, there's other benefits and other items you should be thinking of. And with that in mind, we created this Verizon Employees Guide to Retirement, with the center date being your retirement and all the items you should be thinking about before that, and even beyond into retirement too. And as a thank you to everybody who's with us here today, we're going to be emailing that to you after the webinar.
All right, so let's look at what a volunteer form typically looks like. Let's see if I can zoom in here. Okay, great. So this is actually from the special ISP offer that was released to that specific group of Verizon employees last year. Now, for privacy purposes, of course, we white out any private information about this specific employee. And so this is just an example of a previous offer. It's not indicative of what other future offers might look like, but let's take a look at what an offer form looks like. So at the top right, you have the components of the offer, the $66,000 and the total payment allowance. So this employee must have had 30 years of service at the time of this offer. The expense allowance of $3,750. As we said, that doesn't change from one offer to another in terms of types of offers. And then the termination bonus, we know this must have been a special offer, special ISP, because that termination bonus is $50,000. So really important section here is that paragraph in bold underneath. That is where the due date is specified for that particular offer. So 11:59 p.m. of August 17th, 2021 in this particular case. Now, anybody who decides that they would like to apply for the offer that has received it, you're going to want to fill out that box next to the word volunteer in red. Every one of you would fill that out. And right under that, you can see they do give you a choice for your separation of service date. You can choose the separation of service date that Verizon specifies for that particular offer. They do allow you to request a later service date. In our experience, there could be a few reasons why that might be beneficial, but we've never had someone, again, in our experience, select that later service date. Everyone we have worked with has selected that specific separation of service date that Verizon has assigned. Okay, so moving down this form. So if you remember with that payment allowance, depending on a couple of things, you may have the option between all of your benefit over monthly installments, or maybe 50% in a lump sum and 50% in monthly installments. If that is you and you have those options, this right here is where you would choose between those two options. So you'd select one of those boxes. And then moving down here, you're going to sign and date, of course, provide your email address, your phone number. Here's the fax number that, at the bottom for the Verizon Severance Administration. As Bobby said, we recommend that you keep a copy of the fax confirmation on file. And that is the volunteer form. Okay, so we talked about the nuts and bolts of what an early retirement offer from Verizon looks like. And now what we want to do is, let's take that information and how do we actually use it in the event that you do receive an offer from Verizon. So, there's a couple of factors to consider, and we're going to go through all of these. And what we typically see works really well is just first and foremost, familiarizing yourself with the components of that specific offer. So number one, what is the separation of service date for that offer, the termination date? And not only that, but how far away is that from my original goal retirement date from Verizon? Okay, second bullet point. Know all of the components of that specific offer that we talked through before, the voluntary termination bonus, the payment allowance, and the expense allowance. Depending on what those benefits turn out to be, depending on the type of offer, that could, make a considerable difference in terms of how much cash you're retiring with to draw from in those first months or year even of your retirement. Make sure to know what your medical and other benefits are going to look like if you were to take this offer and be accepted. Now, in your offer packet form that you would receive, there's a really nice visual of how these medical and other benefits would be handled and treated. And it's a table. It looks like a table in the offer packet, and they break it down benefit by benefit. Another thing to keep in mind is that whether or not you're retirement or non-retirement eligible with Verizon, that could play a role in how those medical benefits and those other benefits are treated. So make sure to look at that table because they do break it down for you. Know what your vacation, your unused vacation hours and vacation days look like and how that would be paid out to you. Is that going to contribute to that cash that you have on hand when you retire? And then specifically for special ISP offers, Verizon likes to include certain benefits specifically for the pension to further entice you to seriously consider taking that offer. So we're going to go through those right now. The first is the waiver of the age-based reduction. So as many of you know, we're sure, if you are younger than 55 and you don't have 30 years of service, then there could be a significant reduction in your pension benefit. Well, in a special ISP offer, Verizon will waive that age-based reduction. Okay, the second benefit for pension benefits, acceleration of the next pension band increase for pension eligible associates. So as you may be aware, your benefit is based off of that pension band factor and a few other things, but that pension band factor is on a schedule to increase over time. And so what Verizon will do is accelerate that next pension band increase for you. And then the final benefit, interest rate protection on lump sum calculation. So the lump sum calculation is very heavily based off of interest rates in that particular quarter. And so what Verizon will do is lock in those interest rates in that quarter to protect you from, any potential rising interest rates in the next quarter.
Okay, so here's some questions that you can ask yourself to help you determine, is this the time? Is it right for me to take this ISP offer? And the first question is, am I already close to my original goal retirement year? And this is an important question because whether or not you take an ISP offer is essentially it's a break-even analysis, right? So you have the financial benefits of that ISP offer compared to the additional salary that you would have received if you continued working up until your retirement, the additional 401k saving, 401k investing. So you're balancing those two. And typically the closer that ISP offer is to your retirement, your projected retirement date, the more that math tends to make sense in your favor. Am I fully retirement eligible? This is very important too, not just for your pension benefit, but for your retiree healthcare benefits. Both of those tend to be very important considerations for Verizon employees who are thinking about retiring. Would the bonus lump sum payment make a difference for me financially? Many people that we're talking with are, there's items that they're checking off in terms of their retirement readiness. And one of those could be a payment on a home, a payment on a car. And if that lump sum bonus could help you complete that payment, well, then that could be a sweetener in the deal, so to speak, right? So how does this earlier than expected retirement date coincide with my Social Security filing strategy? So if the offer would cause you to retire earlier than your Social Security election date, that payment allowance that we talked about could bridge the gap between now and when you reach Social Security age. It's also important to keep in mind that the Social Security estimates that you print online assume that you work all the way up until the date that you elect Social Security. So if you were to take the offer, retire a couple years prior to that date, it's possible that your benefit could be slightly reduced, and you'll want to account for that in any planning that you do. Where are interest rates now versus where they are expected to be in the future? This is very important, especially as it relates to the pension lump sum now versus expectations in the future. Not as important as if we're looking at a special ISP offer where that interest rate can be locked in, but otherwise important nonetheless. If I'm retiring earlier than expected, will that change how I can access my money? So everybody's aware of the 59.5 rule. There are penalties that can apply if you take withdrawals from your retirement accounts before age 59.5. There's actually a couple of different ways that you can access your retirement wealth penalty-free before 59.5. The first rule is called the 72T payment program. The second rule is the age 55 rule. And it's important to understand both of those before implementing them because there's nuances with both of those rules. That's actually the next masterclass series that we're going to do here in June, how to access your wealth penalty-free before 59.5. Will I be finding employment elsewhere or will I be fully retiring after this offer? And if you're somebody, especially if you're somebody who's younger, whether it's part-time income or full-time income, that can really bridge the gap between now and when you do fully retire. Okay, so a couple more case studies here. Obviously, a lot of factors go into this decision. So we hope these case studies will help you see how all those factors could work together towards this decision. So here, case study number one, Sally Smith is age 52. She has 30 years of service at the time of this offer. And her original goal retirement date was age 55, or at least the year that she turns age 55, so that she can utilize the age 55 rule and take penalty-free withdrawals directly from her 401k. So Sally has been a great saver. She has $1 million in her 401k. She has a pension lump sum of $700,000. In addition to these retirement assets, she has non-retirement investment accounts of $180,000 and cash on hand above and beyond her emergency fund of $50,000. And she has $5,000 in monthly living expenses, relatively low, again, relative to the retirement asset base that she has, and no debt payments at this time. And so the offer components, this was a special ISP offer where the voluntary termination bonus was $50,000. Her payment allowance, because she had 30 years of service, was $66,000 paid over 48 months. And since Sally is considering a full transition into retirement, there's no expense allowance. So let's break down some of these components. First, since Sally would be retiring before the year she turned age 55, she only has one option to access her retirement wealth before 59.5, penalty-free, and that's the 72T payment program. And it can be a great tool, but there's some limitations with that too, in terms of you have to set a payment program that lasts for the greater of 5 years or until age 59.5. So since Sally's 52, she would have to do it until 59.5. Let's say she were 57, she would have to continue the 72T until age 62, 5 years. But in this case, it's age 59.5, since that is the greater time period. And she has to stick with that payment program every single year until 59.5. And if she deviates from that at all, that can cause penalties on any prior 72T payments that she had taken in the past. So with that in mind, she does have plenty of retirement assets to create the income that she needs, and it wouldn't put too much stress on the portfolio. It's a healthy withdrawal rate. On top of that, there's the presence of her non-retirement investment accounts her cash on hand above the emergency fund, in addition to that voluntary termination bonus, which can, create the supplemental income that could be needed for a vacation, if the roof leaks, if there's a new car, those items can help. She has that flexibility. In addition to that, she has the payment allowance. We don't even have listed here Social Security that could start as early as 62, but that's another decision that she'll want to make in the future. But with all that in mind, yes, retiring earlier here would cause her to use more of the rigid rule, the 72T payment program. However, with that in mind, she has plenty of assets. Her expenses are healthy relative to the amount of assets that she has. And so if Sally decided to take this offer and retire, we would have no issue with her doing that.
Okay, so let's look at the second case study. John Smith, he's 53 years old. He has 30 years of service at the time of the offer being released. And his original goal retirement date, again, also at age 55, or at least the year in which he turns 55. So his assets look a little different. His assets are solely comprised of the wealth from his Verizon retirement benefits. So his Verizon 401k and then his Verizon pension. In this case, he wants to go with the lump sum of $700,000. His monthly living expenses, his base living expenses are $5,000 a month. He also has a debt component here. He's got a mortgage, $1,500 a month, and that's scheduled to be paid off in 3 years if he continues with those base payments. Now for this offer, this must have been an enhanced ISP. We see that the termination bonus is $10,000 and then the payment allowance of total of $66,000. And in John's case, he would take the full payment allowance over those monthly installments. And John wants to retire fully when he retires from Verizon. He doesn't want to retire and then work elsewhere. So that's sort of the context in which John is making this decision of should he take the offer. And, in his case, he's 53. So similar to what Bobby was mentioning in the prior case study, he would need to take distributions from his retirement money to support his lifestyle in retirement. And really his only option to access his retirement wealth without paying additional tax penalties would be that 72T distribution. And so with, the parameters around that 72T distribution, in addition to him having, a debt component that he didn't really want to retire with, he wanted to maybe have that paid off by the time he retired. For John, it wasn't the best decision for him to, take this offer. For him, it was in his best interest to continue working for Verizon, have those extra years of salary, those extra years of his 401k not being touched, extra years of the pension, hopefully growing in value. Okay, so those are the case studies. How do we actually, again, use all of this information in a real world scenario? And, I mentioned this at the beginning of the masterclass, but, one of the most important decisions that we could ever make is when we're going to retire. And when you receive an early retirement offer from Verizon, you have to make that decision typically within 30 to 45 days, because that's the typical timeline from the day the offer was released to that offer due date. And so we bring this up because we want to talk about the importance in our experience of having a financial plan laid out as the foundation upon which you can make that important decision. And not just having a financial plan when you receive an offer, but ideally, we see that having a financial plan put together well before you would even think of, taking an offer has been really beneficial to the Verizon employees that we've worked with at least. Because what you're doing is you're setting that foundation, and then when you do receive the offer, you can make adjustments to that base plan rather than having to start from scratch and scramble and get all this information together and make that decision within those 30 to 45 days. So what we wanted to do here is just lay out, if you're going to put a plan together, what are the components that should be included in that plan and a comprehensive retirement income plan. So consider all of your income sources that you expect to have in retirement. Your pension, whether it's the annuity or the lump sum, your account withdrawals from retirement and non-retirement accounts, and make sure to work with your advisor on any tax optimization that can be done for those withdrawals. Social Security, not just what that benefit is, but how to optimize that benefit for you and for your spouse if you have one, so that you're maximizing the amount of Social Security income you're both receiving over your lifetimes. And then does your spouse, if you have one, have any other income sources? Maybe he or she has their own pension or their own investment accounts that they can take withdrawals from. Okay, so next component, look at all of your expenses you expect to have in retirement. What are your base monthly or annual living expenses? Now, something we do for the Verizon employees we work with is we have this expense worksheet we built out. It includes components, any component that you could ever run into in a given month or year. And so what they will do is take that home and maybe on a Sunday morning over a cup of coffee, fill it out. And we do this because a lot of the time people have an idea of what their living expenses are. And then when they actually go through that process of going through that expense worksheet, they find that their actual living expenses can be somewhat, quite different from what they thought originally. Talk about any inflationary pressures and how that might affect your cost of living throughout your years of retirement. And also, if you have any debts, what is that debt pay down strategy, both leading up to retirement, but also throughout retirement as well? Make sure to take into account any insurance coverage, Medicare, life insurance, long-term care. Have an analysis done of any current coverage you have and figure out, do I need to adjust the game plan there? And the same thing goes for your estate plan and any legacy planning that you want to do. You're already in the motions of retiring. It's actually a great time to review everything, not just your finances, but your estate plan as well, wills, powers of attorney, etc. Okay, so we are going to answer the questions that were submitted to us leading up to this masterclass. And the first question, when should I request my pension election paperwork? Well, Bobby actually spoke to this earlier in the presentation. In our experience, it works really well when you request that paperwork while you're still waiting to hear whether or not you've been accepted for the offer. And the reason why is because even if you're not accepted, well, requesting the paperwork or even submitting the paperwork to the benefit center, there's no harm because, you can't ruin your benefit. It becomes void, that paperwork. And then also, it helps you try to stay in line with that 10th of the month deadline that Bobby spoke about. Worst case scenario, you don't meet that 10th of the month deadline, then you just receive your pension benefit the next month. Next question.
Yeah, when should I call Fidelity about my 401k? And we think regardless if that's, depending on your retirement plan, that could be a taxable distribution as income from your 401k. That could be a rollover into an IRA, depending on your retirement plan. We recommend that you wait until 2 weeks after your retirement date to call Fidelity, just because it's a different entity from Verizon. It just takes time for word of your retirement to spread from your manager to HR, to all the other relevant parties, related parties. That includes the benefit center, that includes Fidelity as well. So 2 weeks is a good period of time to wait.
Okay. Next question, when will I find out if I'm accepted for the offer? So Bobby spoke to this a little bit as well. Typically, it can take up to 7 to 10 business days from the due date of the offer. And if you are accepted, whether or not you're accepted, you'll find out from your manager or supervisor.
Should I take the offer if I'm not retirement eligible? And, this is a very personal question. We can't necessarily give a yes or no, right or wrong answer. I can say for many Verizon associates, that pension benefit and those retiree healthcare benefits are very, very important to them in that decision. So, we recommend that you review your benefits and review those options before making that decision.
Okay. How long of a timeline to my original goal retirement date would be ideal to seriously consider an offer? 6 months, a year? This is a really great question. Anytime you receive an early retirement offer from Verizon, it's a cost benefit analysis, right? Is the cost of, giving up those extra months or year or even years of salary and that additional time of not touching your 401k and not commencing your benefit, is that going to outweigh taking an early retirement offer and receiving that financial incentive with that offer? And so what we have found is, in our experience, is that the longer that gap is between the separation of service date for the offer and your original goal retirement date, the longer that gap is, the bigger that cost of giving up on that additional salary and all those other things I mentioned, the bigger that cost is. And so, 6 months, great, 12 months, great. At the very most, in our experience, we've seen 18 months that it could make sense. It's really going to differ from one person to another. And, that's even another reason to put that plan together and go through that with your advisor to help weigh that, that cost benefit analysis.
Right. That's very well said. How do they choose who to accept for the offer if there are more people who applied than original spots allotted? And the short answer is tenure at the company. But that's actually a good point. So when there is an offer that is provided to your work group, provided to your job title, let's say, you typically know how many people will be accepted. So there could be 7 of you guys that are thinking about retirement, but you know that 2 are going to be accepted. If that's the case, we recommend, and say you're the 7th in terms of tenure at the company, right? You've been at the company the shortest amount of time. We still recommend that you submit your paperwork if you're interested in applying. The reason being, number one, even when people say they're going to accept the offer, sometimes, things change and that isn't always the case. So you might be 7th, but there may only be 1 or 2 other people that apply. Also, it happens that many times in the past, when more people have applied than there are spots to be accepted, in many cases, Verizon has actually accepted more or even all of the applicants who applied. So if you're interested in accepting the offer, it doesn't matter how many people there are in front of you in terms of tenure. It's still a good idea to submit your application.
Okay, next question. I'm under 59 and I'm considering taking an early retirement offer. How should I invest my pension? So I would actually break this up into maybe 2 different questions and 2 different answers. So I'm under 59. I'm assuming this person is actually referring to 59 and a half. That is that magic age that when we reach that age, we can take distributions from our retirement accounts however frequently we want and, however much we want to without having to worry about additional tax penalties. So we mentioned this, a couple times throughout the presentation. If you are planning on retiring and you need to take distributions from your wealth right after retirement and you're younger than 59 and a half, depending on what age or in what year you retire, there's going to be 1, maybe 2 options available to you to avoid those additional penalties. That is something we're going to be covering in our June masterclass, as Bobby said. And that's something that you'd want to go over with your advisor to set up that game plan. Now, how should I invest my pension? Another great question. I'm assuming that we would assume that this person is going with the pension lump sum rollover in this case. And, that's going to depend on a couple different factors. Number 1, what is your risk profile? What's your appetite for risk? Number 2, how much income do you plan on taking from that, pension rollover? And number 3, how long until you need to actually start taking distributions? Is it right away, or maybe it's a year or 2 down the road, or a few years down the road? Those are the main components. There's a lot of other things that play into it as well. But that investment game plan should be customized to you based off of those components. And again, that's something that you would work through with your advisor to set up that investment game plan.
Okay. Do you know anything about what happens if I go on Social Security disability? Does my wife continue with the Verizon benefits? Assuming this person is referring to the retiree healthcare benefits. And if you go on Social Security disability, that does not affect your retiree healthcare benefits at all. You remain under your healthcare benefits coverage, and your wife does too. Any dependents for that matter under the age of 26 would remain covered.
Okay. All right. So it looks like those are all the questions that we have submitted today. Thank you, everybody, for tuning in. Now, we talked about the importance of having a comprehensive retirement income plan. And so what we want to do today is offer a comprehensive income plan built out for you and your families. And if this is something that you're interested in, please reach out to us, and we're happy to be that resource for you. Also, if you have any questions that you think of from this masterclass, reach out to us. You can call us, you can email us, and we will see you at the next masterclass. Thanks for tuning in, everybody. Have a great evening.